Well, thanks for joining us tonight for our Alumni Advisory Board webinar. Before we even get started, I just want to introduce myself. I'm Meg. I've been the chair of the board since inception, which is almost 2 years ago. And I want to say thank you to everybody that's been part of the board so far. That is Matt, Mohammed, Kurt O, Brad, and then our very own, Avi, and then the two that are joining us today are Kurt and Marley. Thank you to everybody. We've had a really good start to the Alumni Advisory Board, and it's been because of everybody's commitment and dedication to it, so we really appreciate it. What does the Alumni Advisory Board do? We are here to serve. Some of you are familiar that you have an Alumni Advisory member that's a representation or a representative to your chapter that you've been plugged in with, that they've been able to help you with any questions, maybe give you some advice. That's one way that we've been working. Another way behind the scenes, we've been working on a sponsorship package for the national level to try and get some sponsorship there. We've worked on an alumni database, gathering together our alumni from all the chapters so that we can expand and have a bigger network. And also these webinars, I know that we've had a couple of other ones, but these are just a couple of things that we've done since we've started, and it's been really great. And I know that there's a lot more that we are going to be doing, and we look forward to that. So tonight, the purpose of tonight is to just understand a little bit more about the Alumni Advisory Board and also get to meet some people that are currently on it and hear about their background, their career, and their experience in serving on the board. So with that, I just want to get started. And Marley and Kurt, could you guys just give a brief introduction about where you went to school, your major, and what you're doing in the real world now? Marley?
Hi, Meg. Thank you for the introduction. So as you said, my name is Marley Good. I went to Penn State Behrend, graduated in 2016. I was an interdisciplinary business with engineering major, so that was kind of a new major when I was there. With that, I have a minor in technical sales and operations and supply chain, which is really was a perfect fit when I found NOBE in my undergrad. Currently, I'm a sales engineer for Mitsubishi Electric out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And there I've been for about 3 years now since I've graduated. So far, it's been a good experience, and I've definitely been combining both business and engineering skills in that role. So if you want to give your introduction as well now, Kurt.
Yep. Thanks, Marley. Thanks, Meg. So hi, everyone. My name's Kurt here. My introduction to NOBE was through the McGill chapter. So I studied civil engineering at McGill from roughly 2008 to 2013. Was involved with NOBE kind of through that time, all the way through from representation on the McGill chapter, as well as attending some of these national conferences, which is really great. Very excited about the one coming up in Montreal. Beyond graduation, so my degree was in engineering. I quickly kind of transitioned into the business side of things. Coming out of school, my first job was actually in structural design. So I worked a little bit in New York City and a little bit in Toronto doing standard structural design for high-rise towers predominantly. After about 6 months post-grad doing that, I moved into a business role for a German wind turbine manufacturer. So that company was called Enercon. I was in a satellite office in Canada looking at the US market. So very international, very business, very sales, but also, of course, a very technical product. So definitely leveraging that engineering side as well in the background there. After doing that for about 3 or 4 years, I briefly did my own consulting thing, set up my own little LLC, had a few customers, basically my former clients and a few companies here as my wife and I moved out to San Francisco, where I am now. And then for the last 2 years or so, I am technically a director of business development for a software company based out of Montreal called Smooch.io that is squarely in the world of tech and in software. So a change up from kind of the focus of what I've been doing on the product side, but very much still an intersection between a business role in a technical world and a technical product. Yeah, as Meg mentioned, also on this board since we started, as we all have been, and then supporting Meg as the vice chair through this last 2 years.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. So we're going to just jump right in. starting with Marley, during your undergrad, you were both involved in NOBE. Why did you guys get involved, and what extent did you take on additional responsibilities within the organization, from just being a member to maybe taking on leadership or serving in committees and such?
Yeah, so I started in NOBE my sophomore year of undergrad. It was a relatively new chapter at that time. It had just been started the previous year, so we were still new, getting up to speed, getting everything set up. So I was involved my first year just as a member. Was able to attend a lot of the events that they put on, different local factory tours that we had done with, such as GE was a big one in Erie at the time, so we were able to tour there. The following year after that, there was an open position for the president, as the previous one had graduated. So I took on that role and was the president for the Barron chapter, and was able to put together some good events, especially as a younger chapter at the time. We did some local recruitment for our career fair. We were able to work with some local companies to get them in and get them talking to our members at the time, even before the career fair had really started. So that was my role as part of NOBE in my undergrad.
Great. Yep, I can chime in here. So I think this is probably a similar story to Marley and to a lot of the other chapters out there. When I first joined, NOBE was kind of just in its inception at McGill as well. It had come out of another business group, so there was some pretty strong attendance. It was effectively just that organization at McGill looking to leverage kind of a broader network. And somebody found out about the NOBE connection to the US, which opened a lot of doors, which was exciting. We were definitely kind of a renegade chapter of doing things our own way. My first year with NOBE, I actually joined as like the vice president or something of entrepreneurship, which was really tied to a case competition. So leading up to an event at the end of the year where we did specifically a case competition, I got involved in the first place because with a couple of friends, I had started another organization on the engineering side that was much more engineering focused. And going into this knowing that I was considering business roles, I kind of used these organizations at school to get a little bit of exposure in these new directions. So that was a great experience. And then from there, I actually was the national rep at the conference in USC, which was probably around 2011, if I had to guess, something like that. And attending that really kind of opened my eyes and connected me to the broader NOBE community. So that's when I obviously got to meet the other chapters and started thinking about things at a little bit of a higher level. From there, I was involved in the national board and in the external role for a year or two, and then through the alumni board as well. So I've definitely kind of your classic storybook of going through kind of all these roles at NOBE. And I think that's one of the best things that we have to offer as an organization, is watching those different roles evolve as you kind of go through the starting stages of your career coming out of school.
Great, that helps level set it a little bit. You both started to mention, I know Marley, you mentioned some recruiting efforts, and Kurt, you mentioned a case competition. But during your time in NOBE, what was the most memorable event or speaker or kind of a memory that you have while you were there? And do you recall any of like the challenges or things that went well that you'd be able to share?
Yeah, I can jump in here. In terms of the memorable side, the first time I attended the national conference in USC was definitely kind of one of the big aha moments for me. So not only did it have some young founders as well as some really cool professors and all these different levels of engagement talking about it, but that really opened the door for me. What I had seen before that at McGill was a little bit more info session oriented. So having companies come in, generally talk about what they do, the types of roles, which was good exposure. But the national conference was kind of the first time that I saw that there was more engagement. So that was something that we tried to bring back to our local chapter. But I think from a student's perspective, the more you're involved, the more you're engaging with these people, the better, rather than just kind of being presented to.
How about you, Marley?
Yeah, I think the most memorable experience for me was planning our recruitment efforts prior to one of the career fairs at Barron. We were able to get a lot of local companies in, and I believe a couple students were even able to get internships off of that. So it was good to see that our work and efforts had paid off, and we were able to help students get the contacts and get talking with the different local companies that were there. to help try to push them in the right direction of, getting internships and getting the resumes to these companies. So that was a really good experience, just to see that it was all working and it was all helping.
Kind of teeing off that too is, you both have mentioned like the bigger picture of everything and how you got to see either like start the planning, but then actually see it through, or like for Kurt, you've seen the progression of taking on more responsibilities and having different leadership positions. When we look at those experiences and your time in the working world, are there any skills, either soft or the harder skills, that you've developed that you wish you would have tried to exercise more when you were in an undergrad setting?
Yeah, absolutely. I think organizing people can be challenging, and that's certainly required both on a student organizational level, but also in any workplace environment. So that could be around throwing an event and getting people to attend. That could be around trying to just rally the troops to go to another conference or attend a national conference or something like that, which is no different than if I'm in my current role trying to convince my own boss that I should be at a certain conference that's been happening, or certain meetings that I think would be valuable for us to happen. So I think one of the areas that, at least coming from an engineer's perspective, where at McGill it was siloed entirely within the School of Engineering, we didn't get a lot of business exposure. We had a few general courses, but it was really pretty heavily technical. So in NOBE and through those first early years of my career is where that kind of softer social side really developed. And I think engineering and business and that fusion really puts you in a great analytical starting point. But an organization like NOBE can really open that up with how you're going to interact with teams of different mindsets. This is a great example where engineers and business students, professionals, whatever it might be, can sometimes be very different. And there can be tension there can be challenges there, but there can also be a lot of benefits, if you get a shared language and the ability to coordinate and work with these different types of people.
Yeah, I would agree, Kurt. I think another big thing that I saw is just getting that exposure was really important. And one thing, not only externally getting exposure and networking with the different local companies, but also working with teams and working with groups internally. And like I know you mentioned the case competition, all events like that are really good to get an understanding of how the different engineers and business majors work together to really form one idea or one thought process and put that in place. So that's kind of one thing that I think is really important and can be seen.
And Marley, you started touching on this as well with your current role of how you every day see business and engineering and the interactions and what that looks like. Can you just give us a glimpse into a real life application of that?
Yeah, so in my role, like I mentioned before, it's really both sides. You have to be able to understand the technical portion, maybe not in depth as certain engineers, but still enough to be able to portray that to other aspects of the business and kind of put it to a different level to either give it to a customer or just a different business portion. So it's really important to have both skills. In my role, in many roles, just to be able to understand what's going on, and then also be able to help and try to solve the problem and at least get the information portrayed to both sides and get a better understanding of what's taking place and how to solve that.
And how about for you, Kurt? You've had several different businesses and have had a couple of different career jobs. What's your experience been with seeing a real life application of business and engineering and the interaction of the two?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can kind of frame that in these two worlds, from hardware and manufacturing and energy, and software and tech, which are very different but have a lot of parallels. In the first, anything around logistics, project management, construction, development, anything like that, you're always managing both sides, right? So I can thread both sides of this as well in my own mentality. But on the one side, you need, your customer is your focal point, and that's who you're trying to keep happy and meet their timelines and meet their deadlines. You're often asking companies or customers to put large amounts of money on the line. They have expectations with that. And then on the other side, you have either your product team or your delivering team or your construction team or whatever it is that has their own budget constraints and their own timelines and their own challenges and things like that. So I think for me, the biggest benefit is just having the paradigm of understanding both perspectives. So the engineering challenges are real, but there are also safety factors built in and buffers built in. And the commercial challenges are also super important. That's what keeps the company's lights on, et cetera. And you need to know kind of where to push those buttons and thread those lines. In my current role, it's a lot more technical, but that can still be important even in understanding what you know and what you don't know. So for instance, I have a lot of engagements with customers where I can pitch a high level overview of our platform and what we offer, but understanding what components it makes sense to pull in my technical team. Because if I pull in a developer or a product manager or whatever it might be, I'm pulling them off of something else they could be working on. So it's an understanding of, when you can handle it yourself, when it's the right time to engage those technical experts, and when it's right to bring these different people to the table.
I think even like in my own examples, when I think about when I've seen business and engineering, it almost just happens with so much fluidity because it just has to. People are always building something that the business needs, whether it's a website, whether it's something or a widget. But you really do need to know when you have the subject matter experts and when you need to pull them in. But then there's like this responsibility for ourselves to continue to learn so that we can learn the technical portion that Marley was mentioning, so that you can go just deep enough that maybe your customer doesn't need you to be the expert, but you need to be able to talk the lingo with them. Which I think is exciting because after school, you're no longer sitting in desks and listening to a professor, but you get to continue to learn if you want to and choose to. So pivoting off of jobs and such, why did you guys decide you wanted to be involved in the Alumni Advisory Board? And can you share a little bit about how that experience has been, particularly as we are the first group to really go through this? How has the pilot stage been? And it's kind of even like, what are you looking forward to in the future with it?
Okay, I can jump in here. Yeah, absolutely. So, I think we've all experienced NOBE on our own school level, and I think there's a lot of benefits that can come out of that. That's really exciting. Like Marley said, like you see connections towards internships and towards landing jobs and progressing through roles. That is a really immediate, tangible benefit of being a part of NOBE. But what I think all of us on the alumni board and all of the alumni that have chose to stay connected on some level or another really think that there's this whole other layer that we could tap into that we just haven't really done yet. And that's something that I think we're all actively trying to do. Setting up the alumni board is a part of that. But really the knowledge sharing across these chapters, the connections you can build with professionals, alumni, students around the world, that's a huge benefit there. And things like the national conference are a great segue into that. But as an organization, I think there's a lot more that we could do to connect those dots. So I think as we set this up, this is no secret that when the alumni board was initially proposed, it was something like 2 hours a year. I think as a group of people, we want to do more than that, and we've clearly done more than that. We've put in a lot more time. And that's, I think, because a lot of us see how much more there is that we can do and how much more, especially from a student's perspective. It's hard to see this when you are a student, but as soon as you graduate, you see like, oh, that really was a great entrance into this world that I didn't have, or that really was a great connection to alumni that I was really thirsty for, or something like that. So really trying to make it all that we can. And I think there's a long way that we've come, but there's a lot more that we can do.
Yeah, I would agree, Kurt. Really just seeing the bigger picture. And as you said, you can see it a lot easier when you're graduated and working. I think another big portion of the alumni board is, and why I joined, is I want to help what the current college students are doing and what the chapters are doing, and I want to help improve it. It's also a good benefit to be able to network with current students, professors. When we go to the different national conferences, it's always interesting to talk to the, different majors, different jobs, just to get a feel for the different industries. I mean, I'm sure, we network every day at work and things like that, but it's typically the same type of industry, same type of things like that. But this really allows us to, go outside of the box and see other industries and see other people and just really help the students that are currently where we used to be, I guess is the best way to put it. But the alumni board these past couple of years have been great so far. It's been good to work and get different webinars set up and help along the way. And I definitely see a brighter future ahead, and definitely more things happening and progressing as the alumni board grows, hopefully, and continues to move forward. I think as an alumni board, as more students are graduating, we'll definitely have more opportunities for past alumni, current students right now who are seniors, to speak and do different things as well.
Thanks, guys. So rather than the traditional, can you give us a piece of advice and wisdom to plant seeds in everybody's heads? I was wondering if you guys could leave us with one open-ended question that you might have that either you found yourself coming back to throughout your career, or perhaps when you're doing a career change, just something that you consider and maybe ask yourself throughout your own career that you would be willing to share with the students. So Kurt, would you maybe throw us your question?
Yeah, sure. And I can think of a couple. One of the ones that I think is the most important and could be the most helpful to especially fresh grads, so this could be in internships or early jobs or whatever it might be, is just to ask yourself how you're approaching your manager and how you're approaching your team. Because I think it's common that when we're onboarding, when we're starting a new job, when we're starting a new role, we have all these questions. We are unsure. If you're at a startup, there's lots of processes that haven't been put in place. And coming back to that idea of, how are you approaching your manager? Are you coming with problems, or are you coming with solutions? Like, are you coming to say, hey, I don't know what to do here. Hey, I need this before I can move forward, etc. In that case, you're presenting effectively more work for a manager. If you're coming, with an insightful take on a scenario, hey, I see we don't have this current process in place. I think we could start with something like this. Maybe you could edit this and improve it as you might be able to. There's a very different mindset and paradigm in both how a manager will view that employee, as well as how that will just naturally propagate future discussions, future projects, etc. So I think don't be afraid to try something to get it to the first step, and then check in once you started that. But yeah, tying it back to the question, like, how are you approaching your manager? Second question would be like, are you proposing problems or are you proposing solutions?
Yeah, that's a good one, particularly with business and engineering. I think there's a lot of creativity in solutions. So, and I used to be a manager, and it's like if somebody comes to you with an idea, just even an idea versus a problem, it's like all of a sudden you're even more interested in helping too. So thank you for sharing that. How about you, Marley?
Yeah, I think one question that I like to ask is myself is, what are my future goals long term, and am I currently doing things to allow myself to meet those goals? I think that's something that I always try to keep myself in check and make sure what I'm currently doing is going to help me get the skills to meet my future goals and to really fulfill those. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind as you progress through your career. If you're at a point you like now, or even in the future, if you want to get somewhere else, just try to keep those questions in mind.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you both for joining us today. Before we close, I just really want to make a shout out that Marley started to do, but really we're going to have seniors that are graduating this year, even additional alumni, and we are looking for more people to join the alumni board. If you would like to be a member, you just need to send a most up-to-date resume, a paragraph statement as to why you want to join the board, and then give us your email and phone number. Those applications will be due on 4/7, so that's April 7th. That's 2 weeks after the national conference. And that can be sent to the Alumni AAB chair at nobenational.org. And then we're also looking for people to run for the board positions. And there are 3 different positions. We've got a chair, vice chair, and a recruiting chair. And the recruiting chair is new. The chair is the position that I've been in. We organize the meetings. We send emails if we need to, create agendas. There's a lot of dialogue between the national board and myself right now, which has been really great. It also gives us a bigger picture of how we can help them more. Vice chair, that position is really to help support the chair and also keep minutes over the conference calls, and then making sure that those minutes are being sent to the national board too, so that they get the follow-up and are in the loop. And then the new position is a recruiting chair, And what this is going to be is this person is going to help recruit new members for the advisory board, and also really help build our network in terms of our alumni database and making sure that we're really tapping into our own network. So if you're interested in those positions too, please feel free to send an email to the AAB chair at nobenational.org. And as a reminder, we have the national conference coming up on the 28th of March, which will be in McGill. And there will be a lot to come from that. So we're very excited. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, thank you guys both for serving on the Alumni Advisory Board. We really appreciate it.
Our pleasure. Thanks to Meg for not only hosting this, but for all your efforts as chair. And to anybody watching this, I will be at the conference at McGill. So if you're going to be there, looking forward to meeting you. Feel free to reach out, and I'll see you there.
Yes, thank you, Meg, for organizing this. And I will not be at the conference, but if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I can provide my contact information if needed. Thanks.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.